Hi, my name is Melissa. I'm here to share my testimony with everyone today and hope that this can move some people, touch some people's lives, and hopefully help them in anything that they are going through personally. So, starting out, I'm going to begin with my childhood. I was raised by my grandparents. They actually received custody of me and one of my sisters when I was about 4 years old, and my sister was newborn. I am a sibling of five. I have five siblings. My mother was very absent throughout my childhood. She loved to choose men and drugs over her children. And when I turned 4, my father passed away a month before my younger sister was born. So that was very hard for my mother to take in, and my family as well, considering my grandparents then got custody of me and my sister once she was born. When my father passed away, he left some money to us through Social Security. My mother started dating somebody else, and he wanted the money. So he actually kidnapped my sister and I. He kidnapped us, held us at gunpoint, demanding the money from the state, and I was very young, so this is a very vague memory for me, but he was violent. He was abusive, and it was bad. I remember my grandmother and him got into a fight several times because he would try to take us from them. After that, a few months after that, my mother decided she didn't want me because I reminded her of my father. And he didn't want me because I was older, the boyfriend at the time. I was older, so he only wanted my younger sister so she could call him dad. So they left me on a random front porch in Pleasant Grove. And that's where we lived at the time. So they just left me randomly, and thankfully my family drove around and found me. And that was all when I was 4. When she left me at the doorstep, my family came and found me the same day. They found me. And it's never been clear to me if she told them where or if they just found me, because I'm under the impression I was left close to where we lived. So once they found me, at this point, my grandparents already had custody of me. Moving up a few years, my mother had started having my sisters and my brother, and she would drag us through her relationships, the abuse, the drugs, everything. They got us away from her. After they got us away from her, we went years without seeing her. But I learned that my grandfather was abusing my grandmother, and in return, she was taking it out on me. I was the oldest. I would get the whoopings. I would get hit with brooms and like skillet pans and just whatever was in reach. I started acting out, and then I became a teenager. Once I became a teenager, I got really bad. Started acting out. I would sneak out. I would go do whatever I wanted. I would hang out with people much older than me. None of it was okay. Looking back, there are so many instances that I could have really hurt myself or put my family in danger because of the people that I was hanging around with. Like, these people would sell drugs everywhere, or guns, or whatever the case may be, and it was bad. And my mother wasn't really allowed around us after that. She would come around every once in a while. They didn't force her to stay away, but she also didn't try to come around. At one point, it had been so long since I had seen her that she came and showed up, and they asked her not to come in so we wouldn't see her. Well, we were told not to look out of the windows either, and I did. I was between like 13 years old, and I asked who she was, and my family got really upset with me, and I got in a lot of trouble because they had to tell me that she was my mother and where she had been and what she was doing and why she was never around, because I knew she wasn't there, but I didn't know anything else at that point. I was too young to understand it. I would see it, but I didn't realize it or understand it at the time. So after she started coming around, at this point I was already a teenager. I was sneaking out. I was going to parties. I was hanging around a lot of people that I shouldn't have been around. I could have put myself in a lot of danger and my family. When I turned 16, I moved in with my mom and her then husband. At this point, she found a husband that she was married to for, I want to say, 15 years. She stayed married to him for 15 years. I moved in with them and I stayed there for about 6 months. And I moved out because I had very bad feelings from him, and there were things that he did that weren't okay that scared me to stay with them because it was leading to other things that would happen. I do think eventually he would have physically hurt me. So I moved out, and I didn't have a good relationship with my mom at that point either. As I became about 19 or 20, she decided to start dating somebody else, got out of her marriage, and got heavily into drugs. So once she did this, I tried saving her a few times. I was old enough at that point to realize what she was doing and it wasn't okay. And I was scared for her life. Although she wasn't really around for mine, I was still scared to lose her. I was scared she would overdose and die or get killed by one of these men. I remember saving her one time and the guy was threatening to shoot me in the head. And my mom did not care. She didn't care that he was threatening me. She just let it happen. And I think that was a moment in my life that I realized, like, yes, I love my mom and she loves me to the best that she can, but my mom wants what she wants for herself only. And, my mother is in my life today. She is in my life. We have a good relationship now, but it made me realize that my mother is for herself most of the time. She's not the mother that I wished I would have had. And I love her and I'm here for her, whatever she needs. Getting into my adult life, I started dating someone when I was 18. I just turned 18. I dated him for about 8 years on and off. That opened my eyes to a lot of things. He was abusive mentally, physically, emotionally. He got into drugs really bad. And it was to the point where I was scared of him, that if he wanted me to do the drugs, I was also doing that with him. And I was scared to tell him no. 4 years into the relationship, we had a child. Well, I had a child. We were breaking up all the time. Like, it was just a really bad relationship. And I got pregnant during one of the breakups, but him and I chose to try to keep going and work it out. And we then dated for another 4 years. So after 4 years of dating him, I was pregnant, and then we still continued to date. When our child was 2 months old, he beat me really bad, almost killed me. He was going to stab me in the neck with a pair of scissors, and I remember so clearly they were really rusty and dirty. He told me he was going to do that if I didn't tell him the answers that he wanted to hear, but also told me I better tell him the truth. But I knew if I was telling him the truth, that wasn't the answer he wanted. So I lied to him and told him whatever he wanted to hear so I could stay alive. He went to jail for a while. After that, he wouldn't give me my son, so I had to call the cops to get my son back from him that night. And it was so bad. And I was so blinded, like, in this love with him, that I still allowed it to happen. I still stayed with him for years after the fact. He had me, like, carve his name in my body and my son's name in my body and everything. I never want anybody to go through that. And going through all of that and staying for years after, I advise anybody in that situation to leave afterwards. I know it's hard. I know you think that you have to stay with that person, but you don't have to stay with them. It's not worth it. It's not worth your life. It's not worth your child's life, and you have to keep going. About a couple of years before I finally just stopped dating him, we stopped dating completely. I started praying, and this is when I knew that I needed to get closer to God, because God kept telling me to get away from him, that I didn't need to have a life with him. He wouldn't let me see my family. He kept me away from everybody. He completely controlled me in every aspect. I wouldn't see my family. I couldn't tell them anything. They didn't even know what he looked like unless I showed them a picture. That's how bad this was. And I started praying, like, God, please help me, because I know that this isn't my life. I know this isn't supposed to be my husband. Like, why am I staying? Why do I feel like I'm stuck? Like, help me leave, help me leave. Finally, I got a job at a restaurant in Dallas, Texas. And from this job, I actually met my now husband. Thank God for him. Literally, thank God for him. He's so different from anything in my past, and he's so calm, and it's just refreshing from anything that I've ever been through. And I remember walking into this job and I saw him, and I knew instantly, like, God told me, hey, that's going to be the guy that you marry. And a month or two into this job, my ex got my phone and he asked who he was, who my now husband is. His name is Omar. And I was like, oh, we just work together. Like, what do you mean? Literally, there was nothing in there that was inappropriate. It was strictly work at that point. And my ex looked at me and he said, you're going to marry this guy one day. I was like, you're crazy. Like, you're so crazy. And he broke my phone. Well, guess what? I married him. So that just right there to me said a lot, because I had prayed for years to meet him. And I know that I wasn't close to God at the time. And he still answered me, and he still showed me, and he still pulled me out of that situation. He pulled me out of drugs and abuse from my childhood and my teenage years, from my ex relationship, into something so much better to provide a better life for my husband and my kids now. So when I finally left my ex relationship, we had a little disagreement. And we were so on and off at this point that we would both date other people, but always go back to each other. And that was like the last 2 to 3 years of our relationship, maybe. And we met up one night. We met up and we went out, and he wanted to discuss seeing our son. So I told him, okay, we can do that. We went out to dinner, and one of my stipulations was, okay, you can see him. We can make an arrangement. You get him this weekend or whatever. We can, nothing through the court, just by ourselves. Because I did feel like, hey, we should be adults and we should be able to get this done. And that night I told him, no drugs. You cannot do drugs. You cannot be drinking when you see him. Like, that's not acceptable. And when you get him, you have to be with him, not leave him with sitters or anything like that. Because in the past, he had the tendency to do that, to get him and then just leave him and go out and party. So he was okay with that, but then he started doing drugs right in front of me. So when he did that, I got upset with him. I told him I wanted to go home, and he got really mad that I didn't want to continue to party with him for the night. Well, he started driving really crazy, and I asked him to take me to my car. I should have driven my own car. I was not being smart. Should have driven my own car, but I asked him to take me to my car, and he was really upset, so he started driving really crazy. Well, we had already had a restraining order in place because he had assaulted me. He had abused me a few times. So a cop pulled us over. When the cop pulled us over, my ex actually asked me to run with him. He was going to run because he was scared to get in trouble for violating his probation. I told him no, I didn't want to run. And he told me to get out of the car or shut the door and go with him. So I asked him to wait a second. I grabbed my stuff, grabbed my purse, got out of the car, and he took off. And they caught him. He ended up actually wrecking his car that night and running, and they caught him and they took him to jail. I had no contact with them for about 3 or 4 years after that, with his whole family, his parents, his sister. I had no contact with any of them. I take that back. Once they asked me if they could see my son, but they said that he was upset and he didn't want them talking to me and all of that, so they declined. And when they declined, we had no contact for years. So I don't know how long he went to jail or went to prison or anything, but I do know that they were really pushing to convict him for a while. And I, to this day, have not spoke to him. A few years ago, my ex's parents reached out to me, and they have now been in my son's life again. And he really loves that. They have a great bond with him, and they have been doing so well for them. A lot has changed in their lives and our lives as well, and we have a great relationship now. But there's no contact between my ex and I. And I can say that if anybody has children with their exes that have abused them or anything, to the situation where you can't speak anymore, it's okay to have a relationship with the parents only, because it really works for us. And it's a healthy relationship with them and his sister. So after all of this was happening, this was actually the same year that I met my husband. And my ex had already told me, hey, you're going to marry this guy. Like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 months before he got taken to jail for running from the cops and all that. And at the time, I was like, man, I am in love with this guy. Like, I know he's going to be my husband, but how does he know that? Because I haven't even told the guy that. So it was just one of those crazy situations. But my husband knew what happened. I told him the story. He knew everything. He knew that he got pulled over, went to jail after he was running from the cops. And I have a lot of trauma from that and from my childhood. I knew in that moment that he was the one for me. Yes, because God had already put it on my heart, and I just knew instantly, which to me I never thought was true. I never thought that that was like instant love was true until I experienced it myself. And when I experienced this, my husband, my poor husband, he helped me through so much trauma, through so much insecurities. I had major trust issues because of my ex had cheated on me a lot and just treated me really bad throughout the whole relationship. And my husband just helped me get through all of that. He would stay up with me at night and just talk with me through everything and help me get better. And he opened up to me as well, but he showed me that I can trust him through this, and he showed me that no matter what it was that I had done or what I had been through or how I reacted to situations, that he was going to stand by my side and help me get through this. So my husband and I started talking more and more because of that. And eventually he was staying the night with me, or I was staying the night with him almost every single night. And I remember one night I looked at him and I told him, hey, like, I know you're going to be my husband one day, and I know my husband is going to be a great man of God. Like, I know this. God has told me, and I can't marry someone who's not with God. And he looked at me, and I was shocked. He looked at me and he said, I don't believe in God. And I told him, yes, you do, and you just don't even know it yet. I was like, my husband is going to be a great man of God, and I know you're going to be my husband. He thought I was crazy. And, looking back, I was like, wow, I was so confident in saying that. But I know it's because God put that there for me. We ended up moving with his mom. Let's see, maybe within that year of me telling him that. And a few months after that, we went to church. We went to church with my husband's mom. And he gave himself to God. And everything has changed since then. He has constantly worked on trying to be better for, himself with God, for me, for our children, and just to keep moving. So I've seen God move in so many different ways in my life. God has used me to help people get through things that I didn't even realize I could help people get through, because I had struggled with it. And I didn't know at the time how I got through it, but I did. Because God has always stood by my side through all of this, even when I was far away from him and not praying and reading and doing everything that I should to be with God. He never left my side. I never felt mad at God for anything that happened to me, but I felt mad at myself because looking back at everything, God tried to get me away from the situations that kept hurting me, the situations that kept making me angry or depressing me and just putting me in bad situations. Like, some situations would just put me in bad situations, and God really tried to help me get through all of that. And I know at the end of the day, all of those bad things that happened, God used them for good things so that I could keep going in my life. And I can 100% say that God kept me alive. There were several situations that I probably should have died in. And I know that because of God, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm married. That's why I have kids. That's why I'm able to build a good relationship with my mother now. My grandmother, who I actually consider my mother, she passed away a couple of years ago, along with my grandfather, who I consider my father. They both passed away in the same year, a couple of years ago. And that also, it broke me. But my husband has helped me through it. My husband has kept pushing me. And sometimes I get upset because I'm like, please, I'm just tired. Like, let me rest. But it's because I let things like that hold me down, like depress me. And he pushes me to keep pushing me through that so I don't get into that cycle of my life. And it really, really, really helps me. And I'm thankful for him. And I know that God pushes him to do so with me. But losing both of my parents also helped me become closer with my mother. Because my grandmother was her mom. So that impacted her as well. And my mom needed somebody in that moment because my mom didn't really have anybody else to help her through that. She has her sister and her brother and her husband, but I did realize that she was reaching out to me a lot because it hurt her that her children weren't raised with her. And she started telling me, like, I'm sorry I wasn't in y'all's life. Like, can we build our relationship? Can we do this? So everything that's bad and evil, it does end up with something good and a positive effect at the end of the day. If you're struggling or going through similar events or just any situation that you think is so bad in your life, I would explain Jesus as the peace that you feel when you're completely freaking out in some moments, or you're just like, oh, I'm freaking out right now, but I feel really calm. And I don't know how to explain that, but I've been in so many situations like this that in that moment I would just be like, it's gonna be okay, I'm gonna be okay, I'm always okay. And in those moments I don't think, oh, that's God talking to me, that's God telling me I'm gonna be okay. But now that I look back at everything, I know that that was God telling me, keep going, you're going to be okay, you're going to get through this, I'm pushing you through, and you're always going to be okay, you just have to keep going. And I'm thankful for all of those bad moments now, because now I want to seek God more, I want to be with God more and spend time with God, and doing so is helping everything else get better.